Well, hello, friends. David here from He Said, She Said. We're hanging out in the wood shop tonight. Thanks for dropping by to make just a little bit of sawdust with me. It's a Saturday evening, and I'm out here because I just needed a little fix. Today's project isn't some monumental thing that's going to take hours and hours. I'm not like making furniture or anything of any great magnitude. In fact, just the exact opposite. So today's subject matter might be a little bit on the mundane side. It has to do with table saw safety and accessories that help you to move material through the saw, but keep your hands away from the blade. I value my fingers, so accessories that help me do that, I'm all for them. So I've got a couple of things here on the table. There's the push stick that came with the saw. And I find for whatever reason, I don't tend to reach for this. I don't know, I think it's just because I'm maybe a little too far away and it's maybe a little bit too difficult to control the material. Mind you, you'd usually be running something up alongside the fence and use this, but for whatever reason, anyway, there's one style of push stick and there's a million different profiles and varieties of something that, again, the basic concept is let's keep your hands away from the blade. There are these little guys, which look like the paddles from the CPR machine, but that's not what they do. I think these might have come with my jointer, if I'm not mistaken, but same idea, something that allows you to move material past the blade and keep your hands away from said spinning blade. Use these from time to time at both stations, both here at my table saw and the jointer. That's another option. Here's just a super cheap 89-cent, I don't even know where I got this from, but I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but there's a couple places where this has served its purpose of not taking my fingers, and the saw actually caught the heel of the plastic here and nibbled away at a little bit of it. But the idea is that a little notch there on the back. You hook that on the back of whatever you're moving through the saw, and again, you can keep your hands away from the blade. It works. It kind of feels like maybe it's made for a child. It's very small, but for whatever reason, this tends to be the thing that I reach for most often, actually. Now, the next one on the table here, it's the big brother to this thing. I made this decades ago, probably when I bought my first table saw that was barely even deserves the name, but I think I had seen one of these or watched Norm on the New Yankee Workshop make one, and I went out to the shop and I cut one out, and I had the profile obviously mismemorized because the handle, instead of sweeping forward, the handle sweeps back. So embarrassingly enough that I didn't get the profile right, it still works. So I keep it around. It's been around forever, and I still reach for it and I still use it. Still has that little notch in the back, and again, it serves the same purpose. And yes, it's an awkward angle to grab it at and use it at, but it actually does work. But it is overdue for an upgrade, wouldn't you say? I think it's finally time that this get put in the pile of scraps that maybe goes out to the fire pit, and let's make something else. So you wouldn't think that this is that sexy of a topic, that there's much opportunity for innovation around a push stick. I mean, you could use just a straight piece of scrap that's laying around that's just a chunk of a 2x4 and serve the same purpose. But it was actually kind of fun looking at what options are out there and what creative things people have done. And I did indeed find something I like and something I want to make, but I don't think it really requires much explanation. So I'm not sure if I can do this, folks, but I think I'm just going to try to be quiet for the balance of the episode because what is going to come about will be pretty self-evident as it's coming about. It starts with this scrap of 2x6 that I've been shoving around the table saw. So this is the raw materials for our next push stick. All right, that's the plan. Let's bring it. let's do this. So that's not on either one of the lines that I drew, but I actually don't think it'll be critical. Let's just see how this goes. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right, I couldn't stand it anymore. I'm breaking my silence. So we're back over here at the drill press for a few minutes, and you're probably catching on into where this is headed. The last thing that this guy needs to actually be of any good is to add a little heel to it, something that sticks down from the back so that you can catch the material with it that you're moving through the saw. Now, while I'm at it, just as you can see that this one has been chewed up by the blade a little bit, whatever we attach here is going to get chewed up by the blade. So I wanted to make it detachable and count it as something sacrificial that can then turn around and be replaced. Now, while I'm at it, I wanted to add another feature to it, have the ability to be able to adjust it up and down based on the thickness of the material that I'm moving through the saw. Now, is that super mandatory? Yeah, probably not. I mean, this is shallow enough, short enough that I can catch like a half-inch thick piece of plywood or something and move it through the saw just fine. But then again, I can catch something that's 1.5 inches thick or something as well, and it works. But you know what? Like I said, I was in the mood for a little bit of a fix, make a little sawdust, and yeah, what can I say? I'm having fun. So this piece the sacrificial piece that we make here, we'll be making those in a minute, but let's add that adjustability piece. You saw me fiddling with this earlier, just to kind of line up roughly where that was going to fall. I wanted to see how big this knob was so that I didn't cut this back heel surface a little bit too short. So I want to work out where this is going to fall and make a mark for its total depth as far as how far into the push stick it goes. And then, yeah. So I've chosen a drill bit here that is the same diameter as the faces of the nut. So I'm hoping I can just drill this hole right here, and then the nut will just kind of press fit down into place, get it lined up with the hole that's perpendicular to it, and hopefully it just like all works out like magic. But we'll see. All right, so this isn't going according to plan for a couple reasons. Number one, I did not anticipate the nut actually tumbling. I figured that the sidewalls of the faces of the nut would just plunge straight down into the hole, but no, the nut actually tumbled on its way down. So A, it's wedged in there pretty good. B, it actually is crooked a little bit. It's not perpendicular to my hole. And also, it would seem that the hole that I plunged in here actually could have been just a little bit deeper because this guy is bottoming out. So fail across the board with this entire game plan. So out come the needle nose pliers to see if I could extract this nut, and then we will begin again with this aspect of the project, assuming we can recover the nut. So this is a gel super glue. So I'm hoping that it holds its shape well enough that it doesn't actually just bleed all over everywhere and then, get into the threads and whatnot. So we'll see how that fix goes. But I think I want to go ahead and fortify that just a little bit further, just for insurance. You either pay on the front end or you pay on the back end, right? I could have invested some more time and care and precision to get this right the first time, or I'm doing weird little gyrations like I'm doing now to sort of make up the difference for not doing that on the front end. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and mix up some water putty to cram down in there. That will also harden and form over the faces of the nut to help hold that still so that it's held fast in there. And then also just the cosmetic factor is that it will cover up this hole. But just why? Because we can. And we must. And that's probably going to be plenty. So we don't have running water in the barn, so I like to just have like a empty shampoo pumper full of water, and I find that gets me by quite well for most of the times when I have need of a wee bit of water out in the shop, because usually I'm just doing something minimalist like this that doesn't just require actual running water and a sink and so forth. We get by just fine. Would have been a nice luxury to build that in to the construction of the barn. But we chose not to because we were over budget on some other things that had to do with the house build itself. So having this outbuilding at all is an absolute luxury. And I went way overboard on the water because the water to powder ratio, because I'm trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm holding a conversation with y'all and doing this as well. And water putty is one of those things that I don't use terribly often. So I find that I'm like retraining myself every time. Hey, what's the ratio like when I need just a wee teeny little batch? And it goes back and forth between, oh, there's too much water, and oh, there's too much powder. So this should end up being like a pretty thick peanut butter. Pretty moldable. You don't want it super dried out. But it doesn't need to be, you don't want it like pancake batter or super runny either. Because it's nice to be able to kind of cram it in where it needs to go and then have it set up fairly quickly. And I'm kind of thinking, that's about what you want. I'm thinking we're pretty close. I'll just go ahead and fold the rest of that powder in just because it's there. So I went ahead and sprayed the shaft of this little thumb screw thing with a little bit of lubricant, just so that, because some of this is actually bound to get on the threads of the thumb screw, but I think with that household lubricant as kind of a release agent, I should be able to back the thumb screw out of there. I want to leave the thumb screw in there for this so that this water putty actually doesn't get in the threads of the nut. All right, so we're just gonna let this dry, and I've got another project next door. Renee and I are actually working on some stuff over in the art studio, and then, yeah, we'll be able to sand this back and then do the last step, which is making those little sacrificial tail pieces. So you saw me use our new push block as a gauge here so I could set the fence at the proper width. I ripped a bunch of this material down for use as the little tailpiece that we've been talking about. Again, it's going to be something that's sacrificial, that it'll get ripped up over time. So I figure I'll just go ahead and make a bunch of them in advance so that when one gets ripped up, I can just pull another one out of a drawer. So this is just OSB, just a scrap I had laying around from some previous project. And it's cheap. And again, it's supposed to be sacrificial, and it will serve the purpose. So pretty much the next thing we need to do with this is to figure out how long each one of these little tailstock pieces needs to be. Obviously, this is enough to make several of them. So then once we figure out that total length, then we'll also figure out the placement for a little oblong hole in each one of them. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to have that adjustability feature so that depending on the thickness of the material that I'm moving through the saw, I can move this tail piece up and down to accommodate that. So kind of engineering the details of this as I go along. As usual, if you spent any time in the shop with me, you know this. I don't have like a thorough plan up front and have like sketches and 3D models and just having done all the math to the nth degree, I kind of build things as I go. So that's what's coming next. All right, so we're getting closer, folks. Off camera, I went ahead and fashioned a prototype tail piece here. It has that lovely adjustability that we wanted. So learned a lot from making this prototype. The main thing was that actually the range of adjustability is really overkill. It's got a lot more movement than is really needed. And also, I knew this was the case, but it does spin, and I do have a solution for that. Now, quite honestly, just this adjustment, just tightening down this knob, snugs it down pretty good, and that's probably sufficient. I do have another measure that I'm going to throw at this to keep that from swiveling at all, just to make this whole thing just that much more stable and safe. But with those lessons learned from this prototype, you recall all of the strips that I had cut down earlier. I had gone ahead and marked them up in terms of length, where to cut them off into the individual pieces, and I had made some other marks for where I thought the length of the little adjustment hole needed to be. So now they're all marked up like crazy because I've added extra marks based on the lessons learned from this guy. So let's go over to the router table and I'll take you through how I went ahead and did those slots. And then we'll do this last little secret weapon, final little modification to, as I mentioned, keep this guy from swiveling. And then I think we're done. So I tell you what, I'm actually feeling kind of sneaky about my anti-swivel methodology with just putting a little button head screw in the back of there and then adding a little trough to the tailpiece so it can guide itself on that button head screw. The other variations on this type of push block that I've seen had toward the back of the push block itself, they made like a trough, a deeper part, and then the tailpiece was a lot thicker, and then there was a thick piece that rode in the middle of the trough, and then there was the thinner pieces that rode on either side of it. So it seemed, I don't know, it seemed more complex to mill that out if you needed another one. I don't know, maybe they're equally complex and time consuming to make the replaceable tail pieces, but in the moment it seemed like the right thing to do. So yeah, pretty pleased with how it came out, and confident that it will see a lot of use. Guess there's only one thing left to do. All right, well, now we know it works. Hey, thanks for joining me today on He Said, She Said. I hope you had fun making sawdust with me, and we'll see you again next time. Hey, maybe I could just glue this back on.